Desi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajikacharya Stokta Dasata Shishimada's Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaja Ki Jai. Ananta Gaudiya Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shlahadadas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. Brihat Madanga Ki Jai. All glorious the assembled devotees. All glorious the assembled devotees. All glorious the assembled devotees. All glorious to Sri Sri Guru and Garanga. All glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, Chapter 19, Text 37. Ataha Prichchami Samsiddhim. Ataha Prichchami Samsiddhim. Yoginam Paramam Gurum. Yoginam Paramam Gurum. Purushayeha Yatkaryam. Purushashyeha Yatkaryam. Mriyamanasya Sarvata. Mriyamanasya Sarvata. Taha Princhchami Samsiddhim. Yoginam Paramam Gurum. Purusashyeha Yatkaryam. Mriyamanasya Sarvata. Others, please. Vaishnavis. Ataha, therefore, Prichchami, beg to inquire, Samsiddhim, the way of perfection, Yoginam, of the saints, Paramam, the supreme, Gurum, the spiritual master. Purusasya, of a person. Iha, in this life. Yat, whatever. Karyam, duty. Mriyamanasya, of one who is going to die. Sarvata, in every way. Translation. You are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially for one who is about to die. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Unless one is perfectly anxious to inquire about the way of perfection, there is no necessity of approaching a spiritual master. A spiritual master is not a kind of decoration for a householder. Generally, a fashionable materialist engages a so-called spiritual master without any profit. The pseudo-spiritual master flatters the so-called disciple, and thereby both the master and his ward go to hell without a doubt. Maharaj Parikshit is the right type of disciple because he puts forward questions vital to the interest of all men, particularly for the dying men. The question put forward by Maharaj Parikshit is the basic principle of the complete thesis of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now let us see how intelligently the great master replies. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastai Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminita Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. So Maharaj Parikshit here is asking a question of Sukadeva Goswami, and it's not like he doesn't know the answer. He knows the answer. He knows the answer to this question since he was a kid. It's described earlier in the Bhagavatam. We heard how Maharaj Parikshit, even as a child, he was Krishna Krita. He was playing and enacting the pastimes of Krishna like that. So he knew the answer to this question. Actually, he knew the answer to this question. So why is he asking this question? Aside from the fact that it's a pastime and the Srimad Bhagavatam has to be spoken, that figures in there as well. But it's part of his humility, actually, intelligence and humility. Actually, in a class that Mukunda Dutt gave back maybe a month ago, he quoted Sanatana Goswami as saying that humility is Krishna consciousness. So Maharaj Parikshit here, he's very humble. He's very humble, and as part of the humility, he's asking this question. He understands, in his particular case, he hasn't really approached, he didn't seek out Sukadeva Goswami, as Archita Prabhu pointed out very nicely in a class he gave, I think, or maybe a comment he made earlier last week, was that, Maharaj Parikshit he made that decision on his own. When he got the news that he was going to be leaving his body in 7 days, he was cursed, etc. So he made that decision on his own that he would go to the bank of the Yamuna and just fast and like that until death. And Sukadeva Goswami and other great personalities happened to appear on getting news of that. They appeared on the scene, but when Maharaj Parikshit, when they all did, it wasn't like Maharaj Parikshit. He was the emperor, okay, and he was a great devotee from birth, and so it wasn't like he informed them of his program. Maharaj Parikshit's response to everybody, Vyasadeva and Narada Muni and this one and that one and this one, we heard the names, I can't remember them, all these great sages and personalities from all over the universe had arrived, and it wasn't, like he just cordially greeted them and, okay, well, thank you for coming, and this is what I've decided to do. And no, he didn't inform them of his decision. I mean, to a certain extent he did. I'm here, to fast until death. But when Sukadeva Goswami came, certainly when Sukadeva Goswami came, he didn't say just thanks for coming, please make yourself comfortable and this is what we're going to do. No, he inquired. He inquired from him. And as I said, once again, it's not like he didn't know the answer. He knew exactly what he needed to do because he's a devotee from birth. But he inquired from Sukadeva Goswami. That's the Vedic culture. That's the etiquette. That's the protocol. You inquire from a person of superior knowledge and realization. And that's how transcendental knowledge is transmitted. In the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the very famous verse, Krishna says, Tadvidi paripatena paripashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. That try to learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master, inquire submissively, and render service. In this case, his service is asking these questions as well. And here's the line I was really wanting to refer to, that upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So something special happens. When you take the humble position, when you're a qualified sishya, disciple, and you take the humble position and you inquire submissively and render service to a self-realized soul, and when you get that instruction, then you're able to assimilate it. Along with that instruction comes blessings from within. From Krishna, from within, blesses you to be able to appreciate what you're being told and be inspired by it and understand it. And that's explained in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upiyanti te. And the next verse, Tesham eva anukam partam aham agyanajam tamaha nasyami atmabhavishto gyana dipena bhashvata. That Krishna says, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. Out of compassion for them, I, who am dwelling within their heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So the two things are working in conjunction. See, when a person, a candidate for spiritual realization, has the right attitude and adopts the right course of action, humbly approaching a bona fide spiritual master, inquiring submissively, rendered like that, then when he's instructed by the spiritual master, super soul within his heart super soul within the heart of that self-realized soul gives him exactly the right things to say, to help that person. And then super soul within the heart of that candidate allows that person to appreciate it, understand it, and become enlightened by those instructions. So that's what's going on here. Between Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, and of course he's very fortunate to be in that situation, and that's probably the main lesson that we can learn from this verse, that we have to try to follow on the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit here, and be humble, inquire, to take direction from personalities who are more advanced than us in spiritual life, and then be prepared to practically apply those instructions in our life. And actually, could somebody grab the Bhagavad Gita for me? I just prefer to read some. I want to read a couple sentences there, but I'd like to do it. I could do it by memory, most likely, but I prefer to just read it right out. So in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 40, in this section, Krishna is talking about happiness and the different modes of material nature. So in his purport, Srila Prabhupada always gives further insight into what Krishna is saying, and he makes the point. Sorry, it's actually 1837. So it's in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he says, referring to the instructions of the spiritual master, he says, all these procedures are very difficult, bitter like poison. But if one is successful in following the regulations and comes to the transcendental position, he begins to drink real nectar and he enjoys life. See? So this is the program. Just paraphrasing what Prabhupada's saying here. He says, in the pursuit of self-realization, one has to follow many rules and regulations. Well, those rules and regulations are, of course, ultimately they're injunctions, shastric injunctions, but they come to us in the form of instructions from our spiritual master. And the purpose of those, as Prabhupada says, is to control the mind and senses and concentrate the mind on the self. And as he says, so all these procedures are very difficult. Some might seem difficult to follow the instructions of the spiritual master, bitter like poison, Prabhupada says, but, and here's the thing, but if if somebody's successful in doing that, if we're successful, in other words, if we're determined, if we really, how would you say it, really apply ourselves and really make that effort to follow the regulations or the instructions of the spiritual master, then here's the result. One comes to the transcendental position and begins to drink real nectar and enjoy life. You see? So it's not like it's just, well, you got to do this, and no, there's something in it for us. There's something in it for us if we, seriously and sincerely follow the instructions of the spiritual master. This is what we're, at least myself, I know if I would analyze myself and be honest in my mentality, this is my motivation. I mean, ultimately and ideally, I'd like to be, have the same motivation as the gopis, in that I just love Krishna and I just want to please Krishna, and I don't want to see Krishna be, hurt his feet when he's walking in the pasture. But I'm not there. Where I'm at is thinking like this. I'm thinking, I just have to, let me seriously follow the instructions of Prabhupada, the spiritual master, in hopes that as a result of doing that, I'll be promoted, I'll be elevated to the transcendental platform, I'll begin to drink real nectar and enjoy life. I mean, ultimately that, it doesn't end there. That's not the ultimate goal. As I said, this is describing happiness in the mode of goodness, and you have to go on from there. But this is a good, starting point for a serious devotee, to understand that, there's something beyond happiness in the mode of passion. Happiness in the mode of passion is described in the next verse by Krishna. He talks about that happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects, and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end. That's in the Prabhupada says. Krishna says that's in the nature of passion. And then once again, at the end of Prabhupada's purport, he says, happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. That means whatever you got to do, avoid it. Right? That's what that expression means, avoided by all means. That's how undesirable it is. It's something that will further entangle us in the modes of material nature and contribute to our staying, in the cycle of birth and death that much longer. So devotees are fortunate there, and they've by Krishna's mercy, we've been given enough intelligence to understand that, no, because everybody wants to be happy. Every living entity on the face of the earth, and below the surface of the earth, and above the surface of the earth, and all the planets throughout the whole, material universe, they want to be happy. Every living entity. Anandamayo be asat, right? Everybody wants to be happy. And generally speaking, living entities are trying to be happy by that last description there, by the contact of the senses with their objects. That's the general, right? The program. Sense gratification. And Krishna is saying, sorry, that doesn't work. And devotees are very fortunate because we're very fortunate to even come and get this information, to even intellectually or academically be presented with this information that sense gratification won't make us happy. And then being a devotee means developing that, cultivating that conviction that, this is true. I have to turn my back. I have to turn my back on trying to be happy by engaging in sense gratification. But you can't turn your back. You can turn your back on that, but you can't turn your back on trying to be happy, on wanting to be happy, because that's like, you can't do it. It's the nature of the living entity. We want to be, Anandamaya be asat, once again, we want to be happy. So you have to, where's that happiness going to come from? Well, Krishna, in the first verse I read, that's the description. That happiness in the mode of goodness is the happiness that we can experience by following these rules and regulations, the Shastric injunctions, which come to us in the form of the instructions of the spiritual master, and which will maybe doing that may not. It almost seems counterintuitive because initially, I think as Archie mentioned in a class he gave recently, it's difficult at first. It can be you seem like I'm doing this to be happy, but I'm becoming unhappy. I'm feeling like uncomfortable doing this, or it's difficult. But Krishna acknowledges that might be what happens in the beginning. He says it might be just like poison in the beginning, but in the end it's just like nectar, and it will awaken us to self-realization. And when we awaken to self-realization as a result of following these regulations, the instructions of the spiritual master, then, as Prabhupada says in the end of that purport, we begin to drink real nectar and enjoy life. So that's what we're, that's our program. That's what we're all about. And for us, we have to, following in the footsteps of Maharaj Bhrgupati for us translates, in my mind, to just making that decision. It's a decision, that I'm going to take, seriously try to follow Prabhupada's instructions, or the instructions of my spiritual master, and try to become happy as a spiritually realized person, not as a materialist. That's a really important big step forward for anybody. Now, one point, an example Prabhupada used to give, just to emphasize the importance of this, not trying to be your own guru, so to speak. He made the point, it's a mundane example, but he'd say physicians, doctors, when they're sick, they don't try to diagnose and prescribe treatment for themselves. They go to another doctor. See, so in the same way, we have to, it requires humility, because, the tendency in the material world is to think that, okay, I could figure this one out. I think I'll work this out, and no, better to consult somebody and take guidance. Here's a great example. Maharaj Bhrgupati, he was the emperor. And not only that, as I mentioned, we heard he was a great devotee from birth. But he wasn't thinking like that. He didn't think, okay, I think I can handle this. So this is bad news, but I'll figure it out. I'm the emperor. I'm a great devotee from birth. I don't need to ask anybody's advice what to do in this. No, he wanted advice. He welcomed it. And we've heard different things he said up to, just prior to this verse, how humbly he presented himself to these great personalities when they were appearing on the scene there. So, yeah, we have to, be like that. We should understand, if we're not following the instructions of our spiritual master, if we're not following the instructions of, the Shastric injunctions, that means we think we know better. There's no other analysis as far as I can see. Either we're following, and then if we're following, that's an indication that we actually have a humble mentality. But if we're not following, that means we think we know better. We think we know better than our spiritual master Prabhupada and Krishna ultimately. See? So this is, I think, a really significant point here, that, a take-home instruction from this verse in particular, and from this section of the Bhagavatam, that, be humble. Just in the material world, they have that expression, pride cometh before a fall, right? Everybody's heard that. And of course, what would be called the opposite of that, it holds true too, that humility comes before a rise. In other words, before you're going to go up, you got to be humble. Acknowledge that maybe I don't know perfectly how to, what to do in this situation, and maybe other people do have some intelligence as well, and they could help me. So, yeah, I have a bunch of other things here, but that was really the main and most important thing I wanted to say. Probably I can make one other point, that as I mentioned, that Maharaj Bhrgupati already knew the answer to this question, being a great devotee and like that, and we do too. We should as well, because this is not the first time that this is coming up even in the Bhagavatam. Earlier on in the first and second chapters, the same kind of thing was gone over between sages of Naimisharanya and Sutta Goswami. The sages of Naimisharanya inquired from Sutta Goswami, if I can find it very quickly here, way back in chapter 1. There's a bunch of verses leading up to this and after it, but this was the gist of it. They inquired him. They said, please therefore, being blessed with many years, explain to us in an easily understandable way what you have ascertained to be the absolute and ultimate good for the people in general. So same sort of thing. This same sort of inquiry is there from the sages of Naimisharanya to Sutta Goswami, and the same sort of answer is there. Actually, there's a couple verses that pretty much parallel, very closely parallel, if not, what Sukadeva Goswami answers Maharaj Parikshit, and how Sutta Goswami responds to the sages of Naimisharanya. And they both congratulated the person for asking the question. Sutta Goswami says to the sages of Naimisharanya, he says, Munaya Saropishtoham Bhavadbir Lokamangalam Yat Krishna Krishna Samprasno Yenat Masu Prasidati. He congratulated them. He said, your questions are very good. They're glorious because and are relevant to the world's welfare because they relate to Lord Krishna. Only questions of this sort can completely satisfy the self. And then he goes on to give them the instruction, Tasmade Kanamanaso Bhagavan Sattvatam Pati Shrotavya Krititavyasya Jaya Puja Chanichada, that basically you should hear and chant and remember Krishna at all times, in all places, in all circumstances. So, and that same instructions, those same two instructions, we're going to hear them, Sukadeva Goswami giving those to Maharaj Parikshit in the upcoming days, that follow. So, but repetition is not a fault in the Vedic literature, because it's just helping us focus more on the, pretty much the one and only important thing that we have to do in this lifetime, which is try to become fully absorbed in Krishna. It's not the Bhagavatam and Vedic literature and culture in general is not meant to give people a whole bunch of information that kind of interests your mind and entertains you and leaves you with no value. No, it's meant to help people focus on exactly what it is that they have to do to perfect their life, and and keep them on track. What's that? There's that verse in the, I think it's the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, from wherever and whatever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one has to withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. So that's what the repetition's for. The repetition and throughout the Shastras is to help us do that. To just focus and stay on track. Remember Krishna, always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna, so that we can become completely absorbed in thought of Krishna. And at the end of this life, get out of the cycle of birth and death, go back home, back to Godhead. So does anybody have any questions or comments? I can't see the time. Can anybody, what time is it? 8:05, okay, that's good. Yep. Maharaj.
Well, thank you very much for a very insightful and helpful class, giving some very important pointers on relationship with the spiritual master and King Parikshit, how he's being helpful to all those who are in his audience. So you had mentioned at the very beginning that why should King Parikshit ask questions which he himself knows the answer to, since he was already an enlightened soul and self-realized. But we all have to remember that he doesn't ask these questions for himself. He has a whole audience of hundreds of saints and sages who may there, and they may not know all these answers. Many of them may, and some of them may not. The important thing is that everyone should hear from Shukadeva Goswami, receive that information, and hopefully memorize that information, and when they go back to where they had come from, they will spread that information where they go. So in other words, Maharaj Parikshit is not only asking for himself, but he's also, as a king, he's always thinking of others. He's thinking of what others need and how others will be helped. And so that's his, in my understanding, his chief reason for asking, in fact, all of these different questions, which we know, after all, he was the grandson of Arjuna, grandson of Bhima, grandson of Dharmaraj or Yudhishthira. He wasn't sitting with his fingers in his ears. They were giving him guidance and instruction and direction throughout the growing up period. So as we have known, he is a God-realized soul. But the glory of his God realization is that he's not only thinking of himself, but he's thinking of others who will then help others, and it will spread far and wide, just like our Srila Prabhupada has done.
Yeah, thank you. Nice comment. Anybody else? Original?
Yeah, you mentioned how by hearing from the spiritual master, uh, the super soul within the heart blesses one. So, what does that blessing consist of?
Yeah, repeat the question.
So you were mentioning how by hearing like the instructions of the spiritual master, the super soul within the heart gives one blessings. So what are those blessings?
Well, Sarvasya Chaham Riddhi Sanavishto Mataksmita Jnanamaponam Cha. Krishna says, I am seating within the heart, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So, Krishna is sometimes referred to as Dyampati, the Lord of the intelligence. Whatever anybody's understanding or not understanding, it's ultimately depending upon the super soul. So, in other words, for somebody, if a devotee's sincere, submissive like that, and doing, going about the whole thing in the right way, then Krishna allows that person, for Krishna from within his heart, he allows him to understand the philosophy and, think this is important. Let me take this seriously, and he gets inspiration from hearing it and acting upon it. That's the blessing. That's my understanding. Oh, okay. That gentleman over there. Our guest. Yeah, the guest. I stopped early, so we got time for everybody. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. At the beginning you mentioned that Parikshit Maharaj was having a humble position when he was asking the question. What is specifically being humble? Now, the traditional view of being humble is someone that doesn't raise his voice, does not object, doesn't get angry. But we see that in Prabhupada's Leela and also Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, they did not follow this view of being humble. Sometimes they were very assertive and aggressive. What does it mean being humble for us?
Well, of course, there's the conventional stereotype understanding of being humble, but for devotees, perhaps the most important aspect of humility to always remember is you're humble when you're following the instructions of your spiritual master. That's humility. If you're not following, you might be like that, but if you're not following the instructions of your spiritual master, then you're not being humble. Then it means you think you know better than your spiritual master. That's not humility. So I would say if I had to focus on one aspect of what it means to be humble, I would focus in on that. That somebody who's following the instructions of their spiritual master, they're humble. Somebody who's not, externally they may be behaving in a very kind of not submissive way. You're not humble. If you're not, that would be what I would say would be the most important criteria if I had to focus on one thing. Hope that. Thank you. Maharaj has a comment.
Thank you. I'd like to touch on the question that I don't know your name, but it's a very useful question. Humility, yes, it's not something external as many people think. You bow down or you show reverence to someone, or it can be all those things, but the most important thing, what is the inner feeling of the person who is humble? He feels that Krishna is supreme, Krishna is the greatest, and he himself is small, insignificant, and has really no power whatsoever outside of what Krishna graces him with. So therefore, his feeling is one of smallness, and yet at the same time, he recognizes that the greatest, the best, the highest comes from Krishna himself. Therefore, it is the feeling that Krishna is tremendous, is wonderful, is glorious, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm nothing except what Krishna gives me, and if he gives me something which makes me look glorious and powerful and great, I give the credit to Krishna, because as far as I'm concerned, next to Krishna, I am nothing. To me, this is what humility is.
Thank you. Another question? Yeah, Martha.
Question is, you said that you experienced like poison when you were taking in the nectar of like Krishna consciousness. Is that because of the bad karma ripening that's like needs to be purified?
Well, initially, generally, people don't start the process of devotional service as pure devotees. Okay, you're conditioned by the modes of passion and ignorance. So, to follow the different rules and regulations, like for instance, rising early, coming to Mangalarti, chanting 16 rounds, that discipline, for somebody whose mind is very strongly conditioned by the modes of passion and ignorance, that might not be very appealing at first. So it's like poison. You don't want to do it. It's uncomfortable. It's kind of like you really got to force yourself to do it initially. But then as you get purified, by the process, you get purified, then you start enjoying it. You look forward to getting up the next morning and chanting your rounds and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's kind of what that section means there. Somebody else had a question? Sarva? Yeah.
Sages of Naimisharanya, and then also Sukadev Goswami was talking with Maharaj Pariksit. But isn't Sutta Goswami, didn't he repeating? But chronologically it comes earlier in the book.
Correct, yeah. We're hearing the Bhagavatam for the first, yeah, that's correct. Exactly correct. Chronologically it's kind of mixed around there.
Apparently, so chronology is less important than the actual spiritual message.
When you read the whole thing, it all makes sense. But I don't want to get into the details now. I'm just going to end this class by reading something, an instruction from Prabhupada. Here, 1968, here in Los Angeles, a devotee asked Prabhupada this question: what should you be thinking about when you're chanting? What do you think about when you're chanting? That's a good question, isn't it? What do you think about when you're chanting? Because we're all chanting. What are we supposed to be thinking about when we're chanting? Well, I'm just going to read you the answer. I'm not going to open it up for discussion. Prabhupada says, chanting? You simply hear. When you say Hare Krishna, you try to hear the very sound, Hare Krishna. That's all. Nothing more. This is meditation. Your tongue and your ear should be engaged in sounding this transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna. Best meditation. This is also accepted in Bhagavad Gita, the best meditation. You don't keep your mind elsewhere. You keep your mind on the chanting, Hare Krishna, and here. So this is responsive. When I was chanting, you were hearing. When you were chanting, I was hearing. So it is exchange. I hear your chanting, you hear my chanting. This is the process. There is no possibility of thinking of anything else. Best and easiest type of meditation. You at once become on the transcendental plane. Goes on. But your response, hearing that, you might think, I know that. Yeah, I know you know that. But it's good to be reminded of it because, it's like, Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, from whatever and wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, we have to withdraw it. So I just heard that the other day. I was listening to a bunch of lectures and I heard that and I thought, wow, this is, you need to be reminded of this. Just because sometimes when we're chanting, we might be thinking of this, that, and the other thing, but this is what we're supposed to be. When we're chanting, we're just supposed to be hearing the chanting, and that's it. That's what we're thinking about when we're chanting. Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.